Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this regular hearing of the Budget and Finance Committee for Monday, June 15th, 2015. I'm Paul Krikorian, Chair of the Committee. I'm joined by my colleagues, Councilmember Paul Kretz and Councilmember Bob Blumenfield, and we are ready to begin. We'll take public comment before we go into closed session. So if you would like to offer public comment, either general public comment on an item within the jurisdiction of this committee or specific comment about an item on today's agenda, please fill out one of these cards, as Mr. Carrion has already done, and bring it forward. Then members, after public comment, I'd propose items 7, 8, 9, and 10 as consent candidates. So if there's no objection to those, and are there any cards on those matters? Seeing none, public comment on those matters is closed, and those items will be deemed approved on consent. That brings us then to public comment. I have no general public comment cards, so general public comment is closed, and that brings us to specific public comment. Mr. Carrion, so far, is the only card I have, and he's here to speak on item number 3. Mr. Carrion, welcome.
Thank you. I'm here to speak on item number 3, just to give you guys a little background information. Approximately 10 years ago, I was driving on Soto Street, and the city had this issue come up, so they put K-rails there. And they blocked the public from walking through. I almost ran over a kid who jumped off the sidewalk, who got in the traffic lane. I was driving a full-size Suburban, towing a trailer. If I would have hit that kid, I would have killed him. Since there's been over a dozen accidents, and about 6 people have been hit for walking around the K-rails. Okay, the city's done a poor job of negotiating this, and this is why I'm here today. It's got to the point where you guys are ready to do something about it. I'm here to urge you to settle this, fix this rail. This thing's been here for 12 years, okay? 12 years is enough time. It's probably doubled or tripled in price to fix it now than if they would have fixed it back then. So I'm urging you just to, take into consideration that the Soto Street is being worked on several blocks down. So now you're getting a congestion where this is at, okay? People have to walk 3 blocks around in order to get to where they have to go through, because there's a stairway right there next to that hillside that's coming down. They don't walk it. They're not going to walk 3 blocks with groceries and everything, so they'll walk in the middle of the street. Okay, previously working with Mr. Weezar's office, across the street was the park, Hazard Park. That was mud until I got involved with the Americans with Disabilities Act, and they put blacktop on there. But this is just giving you an idea of background on how this little area has been neglected for so long. Right now it's blight. It's ugly and nasty to walk through there. So I'm just here to ask you guys, take into consideration when you look at this motion to push it through as soon as you can, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. All right. Are there any other cards on items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, our closed session items? Seeing none, public comment on those items is closed, and we'll proceed now into closed session. And we'll begin with, I'll leave it to the city attorney's discretion, but we'll go in order unless you tell me otherwise. So we'll start with item number 1.
And this
in open session now, and on item number 5, members, there's a report before us that recommendations from the CAO, and if there's no objection to the recommendations of the CAO, it will be the action of this committee to approve those recommendations. Item number 6 is City Attorney's report relative to the status of general fund liability accounts 9760 and 9770. This is a standard quarterly report that we get. If there's no questions about that, I'd like to add that to those items that we are deeming approved on consent. And then that brings us to our last remaining item, which is item 11.
Item 11 is the City Administrative Officer Report and Resolution relative to authority to defease all outstanding landscaping and lighting District 96-1 assessment bonds. That's Prop K, Series 2000, 2001, and Series 2002 in the amount of $16.025 million.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Soraya Bago with the CAO's office. He basically just summarized what I was going to say about the item.
Well, I hope you're going to say more than that. Like, you can start with, what's a defeasement of these bonds?
It's basically paying them off. We
Okay.
pay off the bonds so that we remove the bond covenants that are in place, and there's
Okay.
more flexibility as to how the
So
property funds
it's
can be used.
essentially a prepayment of what we owe.
Yes.
And we're using savings from Prop K to do that in order to reduce our long-term cost of money.
Cost of, right. So by doing this, we will save the property owners approximately $2.67 million in interest costs.
Okay. And why do we want to do that rather than spending the $16 million in savings in new Prop K projects?
As I mentioned, if once we defease the bonds, that will eliminate any of the bond covenants that restrict the way that the proceeds can be used. So once you eliminate the bond covenants, then you can add projects, and there's less restrictions as to how the Prop K funds can be used.
Okay.
Bernice Hollins. I was the former program administrator for Proposition K. What this is going to do on the programmatic side is that it will increase our ability to fund projects going forward. We currently have roughly $3 to $4 million budgeted every year for debt service. So by repaying this debt earlier, and what we're using as primarily interest funds, what we would be able to do is now going forward, $3 to $4 million will be freed every year through the end of the program in 2026-27, and that money would then be reinvested in projects.
I see. So you got about 10 or 11 years of $3 million a year savings for your $16 million investment, and
Yes.
that money can then be spent in a wider array of projects.
That money would be spent specifically to complete the remaining specified projects that the city is obligated to complete under the terms of the Proposition K ballot measure.
Members?
Just to note that prepayment sounds a lot less nefarious than defeasement. I've learned the definition of subvention in this committee, and now I have another one. So,
But basically, this is just you're just dealing with a better interest rate. We're not changing or the projects in any way that's moving forward, and projects that are going to receive interest for those projects and receive the same amount of interest, designated projects that would have a certain amount of interest associated with them will receive the same amount. Is that correct?
It doesn't change the dynamics of how projects are funded. What it does is it gives us more cash on hand to accelerate completing those projects.
And I assume that the savings in interest that we're getting by doing the defeasement on that, the return on investment in doing that with your $16 million is better than what our return on investment would be if we put that $16 million someplace where it could draw some interest and then use that to pay off.
There are restrictions as to how much you can earn, arbitrage restrictions as to how much you can earn on bond proceeds.
Okay. And it has to be less than the amount that you're paying in bond interest.
There's some formulas to it, and it depends, but generally if the bond proceeds earn too much, then the city has to repay the government for those excess interest earnings.
Okay. All right.
Well, so you have a project like a Prop K project, let's say a skating rink, that was put in 12 years ago, and it's got a certain amount, $5 million was put in, and at this point in time, it's worth $6 or $7 million because of the interest that might have accrued on that. That's not going to change in terms of doing what we're doing with the interest for future outstanding.
No, none of the methodology, the program procedures for awarding interest inflation aren't impacted by this.
Okay.
One last thing is we would like to, if possible, have council approval by June 23rd, so we have time to do the fund transfers necessary before the fiscal year end.
Okay. Well, first things first. Members, anything further on that, on this matter? Any objections? All right. Well, seeing no objections, it'll be the action of the committee to approve the recommendations, and Mr. Hale will work forthwith to try to get it on the council agenda as quickly as we can.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any further action before the committee?
No.
Seeing none, we are adjourned.